Hello, all my crafty people out there. It is time for our project this week. If you haven't been here before, my name is Stephanie, and I upcycle clothing, generally thrifted items from my local stores. We upcycle it into new clothing or into accessories sometimes. So all that being said, this week's project was a wonderful suggestion by one of my subscribers. I'm so happy with this. She asked if I could make a Peplum shirt out of a man's shirt. So, while I was thrifting, I found this. And yes, it's a man's shirt. It's free assembly. It's a triple XL. And it should be, I hope, plenty big enough for me to make a Peplum shirt out of. Now, Peplum, if you're not familiar with it, is generally a top, could be even a jacket, that's more fitted, and then there's a kind of a fringe or an excess gathered fabric at the bottom. Anyway, it's a real flattering design, so we're going to give it a try with this. And these happen to be my school colors, so it's going to be my new spirit shirt. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, or just follow along, see if you like it, and I'll meet y'all at the table. Okay, everybody, I went ahead and folded my shirt in half. So this is the button placket, so it's just folded in half, and I've met every seam I can with these little binder clips just to make sure I've got it as straight as possible when I make this first cut. I went ahead to the mirror, tried it on, and figured out where I want that first cut to be. And what this is going to do is it's going to separate the top, obviously, from what we're going to use for the ruffle on the bottom. And the reason I'm making this first cut here and not coming up the sides and cutting everything off is because I want to keep this whole. If I can keep it whole and only have to put a gathering stitch in it, that's great for me. So, that being said, I'm going to try and keep it straight on my grid as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect because it's a shirt, but I'm going to give myself a little leeway so that I can come back and straighten it if I need to. So this is my pen where I want to cut it. It's hard to see on this busy fabric because, boy, howdy, is it busy. And I'm going to cut it enough for not only a seam allowance, but like I said, a little bit of straightening here. So we're going to grab our handy dandy rotary cutter and our ruler that hooks onto the side of our mat, and just going to cut across here. Hopefully it did. So this is our bottom half that we're going to use to make our ruffly part of our shirt at the bottom, like that. And this is the top. I'm going to go ahead and take all the pins off, or the clips I should say. And what we can do with this, there we go, that's pretty straight. This is going to look a lot like the white one at this point, the one with the jean at the bottom. What we're going to do with this is we're going to cut up the sides, cut the sleeves off because I'm going to save the sleeves. I'd like to reattach these sleeves as gathered kind of puffy sleeves on in the new armholes. So we're going to save those. And I'm going to use something that I did for my pink shirt dress. I'll pop up a picture of the pink dress video. This is the pattern I used. Obviously this is a dress, but all I'm looking for is this top portion of the pattern, and that's what this is. And this will give me an armhole. That's really, and some darts. I'd like to have darts because again, the top is kind of fitted, whereas that makes the bottom look a little cuter whereas it's full. So we're going to be laying our pattern down like this and cutting this out after we cut up the sleeves, which we're going to do just by our usual process of going up the sides. Whoops, take our big scissors here. Going up the sides, and I think with this one, this time when I cut the sleeves off, I'm going to cut on this side of the sleeve and leave the seam allowance on the shirt. Reason being is I'm going to end up cutting it off anyway, so I don't want to have to cut that bulk twice. So just going to cut up the sides and cut the sleeves off, and then we'll get to prepping the rest of it. Okay, I just wanted to show y'all before I started cutting, I overlapped this shoulder seam by about a little more than 1/4 of an inch. Probably more like the seam allowance, because it's not going to need the seam allowance. And again, I'm just going to be cutting from here up this side, through the armhole, down, dart, down. This part is not getting cut at all, and I think it should be good. It's a little black in the back, but I think it'll be okay. So let's get to going. I'll cut it up, and we'll start figuring out the rest of it. Got to draw our darts. So what I'm doing is I'm folding the paper on that line of the bottom half of the dart, lining it up where it's supposed to be, right here on the piece of fabric, just making sure it's matching the edges of the seam. And we're going to draw it from one point to the other. Like that. And darken that line up a little. Like that. And then we're going to fold the other side. I'm not a big fan of darts, but I try to think of creative ways to make them. This seems to work. Oops. Got it wrong. There we go. Make sure that fits there. I'm going to draw it again. We're just following the line there. So that's our dart. Alright everybody, I got the darts put in, and that's just sewing down that line to the point of the dart. And really, you didn't have to draw these, or I didn't have to draw these, because of the way the fabric was cut. The dart was there. All you had to do was pinch it and sew down the seam of it. But those are our darts. Also measured to make sure that this side, the back side seam, was the same as the front. It was a little longer in the back, but I just trimmed it. It was like maybe an inch longer all the way across. So I trimmed it down so these two would meet. And I'm going to go over to the machine, sew down these two seams. Then we'll work on figuring how much gathers we have to put in our sleeve to get it in this smaller sleeve hole. And then the other thing we're going to decide on, I'm still kind of on the fence, is whether or not to take this collar off. I'm going to try it on after I get the sleeves in to see what I like, and I'll let you know. But again, I'm going to sew these side seams first before we get started on the sleeves. Okay, I serged up the side seams like this. I figured serger was probably a good choice. This is light fabric. It's not super heavy. It's not stretchy or anything. It's cotton, but it's light. Kind of like a nice poplin or something like that. Okay, so for the sleeves, what I'm doing is I decided against gathering because it's just a mess. So I'm just putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pleats in the top of this sleeve. Now, this is strictly up to you. If you wanted to do gathers, if you find that easier, go for it. What I'm doing though is I'm folding my sleeve in half so I know where my bottom seam is and where the top of my sleeve seam is, so I can match that to the bottom and the top of this sleeve, or the armhole I should say. Then I'm going to shove the sleeve in, obviously right sides together. That'll put it right sides together. And I'm going to pin that bottom seam first, and put it like this. So I'm pinning the bottom seam. That's kind of like our checkpoint. Make sure the seams line up, and just pin that there. That is a small pin. And then I'm going to go to the top seam, and I already know where the top seam is on the shoulder, so I'll just fold that in there and pin it as well. Alright, and then what I found easiest was to put a couple of pins for a few inches down here at the bottom. I don't really want obviously any gathers at the bottom of my armhole, so I pinned it, and I pinned it all the way to the seam where your shoulder part meets the back. And I did this something similar over on the front side. The front side only ended up with 2 pleats and the back side had 3, but I turned it inside out to look at it. I think it'll look great. Well, it'll look good. I don't ever want to say anything looks great. So then you know how much excess you've got on either side. This is the front of our shirt. And I wanted my pleats to go out like this. So I put one close to my pin up here, to the top, and then I put one a little further down that it ended up taking up the rest of that slack, like that. So it only took 2 pleats, and again, this is going to be dependent on how big your sleeve is, how big your armhole is. You're just going to have to kind of work it in there. And of course, like I said earlier, gathering, if that's your preference, that works too. So I'm just kind of taking up the space here. I've got a little extra there. So kind of have to finagle it and work with it until you've got it just right. Might have to make one pleat a little bigger. That's all. But you can go back and forth and just kind of make sure that they match each side. And once you've done that, then you're ready to sew in your sleeves. So I'll meet y'all at the machine. We're going to try a little bit different angle, maybe seeing down on the machine a little better. I am going to sew in my sleeve. I've already put all the pleats in that I'm going to, so I'm going to start at the bottom and go around, and of course I'll catch my thread when I come back around, and then we'll check and see if we're going to use that collar or not. Okay, this is what we've got left of the shirt to work with. This is the bottom of the shirt. This is the hemline. And I have folded it in half and then folded it in half again along the side seams, and the back of the shirt is folded in half. So this is my button placket over here, as you can see. So, and I've unbuttoned it to make it easy. I am lining up my hemline on both sides and my button placket over here because I want to make sure that this part is straight. That's going to be the part we're going to keep because I don't want to hem anything. Y'all know how I am about that. I will use what I've got. And I want to cut it somewhere right above this second button. I went and took put the top on and kind of gauged how long I wanted the bottom outside of the top. And I'm thinking I'm going to cut it probably about 1.5 inches up here. That'll give me plenty of room to gather. And I do think I'm going to gather. I'm going to run a gathering stitch. And it'll also give me a good seam allowance. So I'm going to do about 1.5 inches up here. And you always want to err on the side of more, obviously, because you can take away, but you can't add. All right, there's our leftover piece. This has got quilting written all over it because of the print and everything. So this is the bottom half that we're going to connect to the top half. And there's plenty of room here to get a good gather out of it. It'll definitely be poofy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the button placket open. I'm going to run a gathering stitch from this button placket all the way around, gather it, and then we're going to pin it onto the shirt. And I think I might just leave the button placket open all the way down. It's going to be easier to put on and off. It's not going to be comfortable to pull over my head. So I'm going to want to maintain the button placket. So again, I'm going to give a gathering stitch all the way around, start gathering this, and figure out where we want to pin it on. But before I do that, I want to mark a couple of spots. Obviously, I've got side seams over here, but I want to fold this in half again. And I'm going to mark this spot back here so I'll know where the center of the back is. Kind of use it as a mark. So that'll give me my 4 points of alignment. I'll have the center back, the side seams, and the front placket. That way, when I'm gathering the other fabric, I'll have the same points to match up and keep it from bunching too much in one spot. So just make sure my mark came through. Yep. I'm going to give it a little bit more because this is a busy pattern. And that will be covered up and lost in the seam. So no worries. It's washable anyway. So let me go run a gathering stitch on this and then we'll work on the rest of it. Okay, I ran a straight stitch all the way down this piece of fabric. I stopped at the button placket. I didn't include that. I made it a different color bobbin on the bottom because it's the bobbin thread that you're pulling, so it's yellow. And I made it 3.5 millimeters long. Well, I think that's the measurement. Anyway, 3.5 is what I set my machine to as far as the stitch length. So all you do is start kind of casually gathering. Now I stopped my gathering right here on this side because that's my little dot. I want to mark my center. So I'm going to leave that hanging. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pull again. This is my bobbin thread. And I'm just pulling. Traditionally, you're supposed to run 2 lines of basting for the gathers. That's in case one breaks. I just tend to be very careful and not waste my time with a second line. So just pulling the thread along, the fabric along the gather. When you get to the seam, it gets a little stiff, but it will go over it. Or at least on this one it will. It's not a really heavy seam on the side. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get it gathered enough where we can start pinning it to the bottom of the top of the shirt to make our little poofy bottom. Okay, before I started to apply the gathers, I did mark the center of my top half in the back so I'd have it to pin. And that's where I started. My pinning was in the back. And I figured out from one side at least that I have a lot of gathers here. So I'm not going to gather it. I'm not going to need to gather it quite this much, obviously. So I'm just kind of spreading out the gathers, trying to make sure I don't mess up this side. Then I've already got straightened out to the point that I need it. So I'm just kind of pulling the gathers back out. And this is a process. It's a lengthy process, but the good thing is it can be repulled to make it, fuller again. So I'm just going to start pinning along here. First thing to do though is try and meet up these side seams. And you can see that I still need to pull a lot out. So get closer to that side seam. That is almost there. So we're going to put a pin in the side seams. And then we're going to pull a little bit more out of this. And just pin it probably every inch, maybe every 1.5 inches. Because you want to make sure you keep it, fairly even, the gathers. So once I get all of this pinned, then we'll go over to the machine. Sew this. Again, this is right sides together. We're putting the seam on the inside of the garment, traditional style. And once we sew this, then we should be able to try it on. So let me finish pinning, and maybe I'll just see y'all over at the machine first or after. Okay, just wanted to show y'all. I've got the bottom and the top pinned together, right sides together, and I've pinned it quite a bit to try and keep it in place, keep all my little gathers pretty evenly dispersed. And I went ahead, and before I gathered it, I did run a serge line down the top, or the raw edge of both the top and the bottom. That just keeps it from fraying in this process, because when you're gathering and you're pushing fabric and everything, you're putting a lot of strain on it and it will just fray, especially a light cotton like this. So it was just a safety thing, a clean, neat thing. And I'm also going to be sewing right below that serge line. That's going to be my seam allowance. So it should be perfect. Just wanted to let y'all know before I put it on the machine. Okay, one last thing I'm going to do before I try it on is I'm going to take that stitch that we just put together, that seam where we put the top and the bottom together, and I'm going to fold it towards the top, the flat side of the blouse, not the puffy side. And I think that's the right way I should do it. Yeah, I'm going to fold it towards the top, and I'm going to top stitch right next to the seam right there, just so I can catch this seam, keep it folded down, and give it like a nice neat finish. So let me do that, and then we're going to try it on. Okay, before we try it on, the sleeves are pretty puffy, so I'm putting a little pleat in the bottom of it. It's about 1 inch worth of a pleat, but I think it'll keep it from being too puffy. So I'm putting the little pleat in, and I'm going to put a button over the pleat, a little yellow button. So it'd be decorative, but I didn't go through any major painstaking process of other than finding the center or the top of the sleeve seam and folding it at that point. So I just wanted to let y'all know before I try it on, I'm going to put that little pleat in the sleeve. Okay, everybody. I think it turned out pretty stinking cute. Little buttons on the sleeves. Nice fullness without being too full. The shirt fits well. I left the collar. I like the collar. I didn't want to take it off after I tried it on. So, hope everybody enjoyed this. It was honestly a pretty simple project. The most challenging part was just shaping up the top to receive the sleeves again. And you could go sleeveless if you wanted to. So, there's probably plenty of ways to do this, but you just saw my way. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will catch y'all on the flip side of our next project.